Hi guys, and welcome to the show. And today we're going to be comparing two Seiko SKX009. On the left here we have the J version. This is made in Japan. And then on the right we have the K version, which I believe is made in Malaysia. So the point of this video really is to get to the bottom of which is better, what are the differences between them, and is it worth paying extra for the Japanese version, which is actually depends on who you buy it from, but is generally from about 20 all the way to 60, even beyond dollars more in price. So I've split the watch up into these categories, and we'll just go through it and try and get really at the bottom of the differences between them. There's also another motive for this, is that I intend to mod out one of these, and I really want to, before I start modding out a version for my viewers, I really kind of want to understand which one would be the better of the two, and is it really worth buying a whole batch of the Japanese version? Can I save some money and buy the Malaysian made version? Now, before I get into comparing these two, they both come with either on the bracelet or the rubber band. Now, this by no means is limited to the Japanese version. The Japanese version can be found with both the Jubilee bracelet and the rubber, like you see here, and vice versa for the Malaysian version. So this is the K and the J. A quick note about the rubber band. I just thought a really cool thing to point out is, because I haven't owned the rubber band version before, it has the matching tsunami wave that you see on the case back, and I've kept the plastic sticker on for a good reason. We'll get to that very soon. So I just thought it was a neat little thing to point out. And of course the buckle is brushed and just signed very simply Seiko on the back. So let's go through the list. First we have dial. So the first thing to really compare is the dial. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's a definite color change. Look at the blue on the K version compared to the J version. The J version, the Japanese version, is slightly darker. It's more of a navy. Well, they're both navy, but this is leaning more towards a navy blue, whereas the blue on the Seiko on the K version is more towards a royal blue. So that's the first immediate difference. The second thing is, now if we look at the dial, it's very difficult to look at. The K version has just divers 200 meters written here, and the Japanese version has 21 joules written underneath. Of course, if we look right down at the bottom here, we'll see that that they've actually signed on the Japanese version made in Japan. On the K version, all we'll see is the designation of the movement, which is very difficult to pick up, but we could just see it there. Hopefully my camera is working macro now, and again you can see that difference in the color and the blue here really well. As I move it in the light, you can see that difference in color. The differences in color, to me, is not really a big deal. I actually prefer the K version. It's a bit more lively. But again, the more darker blue is also quite nice. So it's just a matter of taste. The layout of the dial, everything else except for this two little extra little bits of information and text, is the only difference between them. Everything else, like Seiko Automatic, it's all exactly the same. The chaptering, everything else. So the next thing in the list is the case. So let's have a look at the case. Now there is a huge fundamental difference. Look at the polishing on the Japanese version. Look at those crisp, how it's high polished and then matted at the top. It's still high polished and matted here, but the matting is slightly different. Can you see that difference? Look how crisp the edges are on the Japanese version compared to the very kind of rounded edges on the K version. So the polishing, we have a look, the polishing is definitely much better. Look at those sharp edges on the Japanese version, is definitely superior on the Japanese version. It's the crispness of the edges. If we look, if we put them together, look at this corner. This is on the Japanese. Look how sharp that, it could almost cut you. Whereas this is a little bit more rounded. It's not a dramatic difference, but it is noticeable. I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me know in the comments if you can see that difference in polishing. Especially the matted area at the top is done a lot better on, if we have a look. Look at the matte polishing here. It's kind of, and then look at it on here. To me, the Japanese version is superior. So what's next in the list? It's the crown. Now this is quite peculiar. I must admit the crown action is better on the K version. It threads nicer, and it just has setting the time is pretty much the same, but the threading is a lot smoother on the K version. On the Japanese version it's still pretty good. Setting the time is absolutely fine. The actual operation, come to screw the crown back in, it doesn't thread so easily. So the actual advantage goes to the K version, which is quite surprising. When we look at the bezel, if we turn the bezel on the Japanese version, it's quite stiff. There's no play whatsoever. It doesn't really make that much noise. I don't know if you guys can hear that. If we compare to the K version, it's a little bit more tinny. It's easier to turn. There's not so much play. It's pretty good. It is pretty good. But for me, I think the Japanese version is just slightly that bit better. But honestly, we're nitpicking. We really are nitpicking here. As far as the case back, now there is no difference in the case back whatsoever. But what is interesting is the sticker is a slightly different color. Again, it's slightly different color blue. This is more metallic, where this is more, doesn't really pick up that well in the camera, but there is a difference in the color of that blue. Engraving exactly the same, the only difference being is that on the Japanese version, if we look, where is it, if this thing will focus, right there it says Japan, whereas on the Malaysian version it doesn't say Japan. So that's the only difference. Okay, so next we have the crystal. Crystal is exactly the same. There is no difference. It's beautifully done. It's nice and flat. There is no difference whatsoever. Now let's go to the movement. Now the movement is quite interesting. Now as I talk through this, I'll put some images on the screen. To the naked eye, the movement looks exactly the same. It's indistinguishable. There's no discernible difference. It looks exactly the same. Now I have heard of people say, oh well, they use different lubricants and different oils and blah blah blah, but that of course you can't notice with the naked eye. So whether that's true or not, I wouldn't be able to tell you. The movement is exactly the same, at least in appearance. So what have we got next? Well, performance. Now, how does their movement actually perform? Well, as you can see, Japanese version is running a tiny bit ahead, and the K version is running a little bit behind. Now, who is actually more accurate? If I just look over to my clock, 4:23. I'll have to give it to the Japanese one. The Japanese one is a tiny bit precise. It's running a few seconds fast, whereas the K version is running a few seconds behind. But really, we're talking, not even, I don't know, I mean, look at the seconds now, we're talking, I've had these running for a few days now, we're talking, I don't know, 10-second difference, both performing impeccably well. So I would say performance-wise, they're almost the same. I mean, the Japanese one just a flick, just a fraction more accurate, but really, we got to give respect to the K version as well, because they're running very, very well. Okay, next we have the cost. As I've said, as I mentioned at the beginning, K, this retails for about 200. You will find it around the 200 mark, and this one is a little bit harder to get hold of. I actually had to import the this Japanese version from I can't remember if was it Hong Kong. I can't remember, but anyway, I really had to scour out the internet to find it, and it took a little while to get here, but I had to pay extra, which is a little bit annoying. So the K is better value for money, certainly. Right, now the loom. Now the loom, of course, we'll have to switch over to a loom shot. Before we do the loom shot, I would like to point out there is a slight kind of different color in the actual loom. If we look right close, the loom on the K version here, very much whiter. You can hardly even see the outline of the indices. You can only tell where the printing of the dial is and the actual loom is applied. Whereas on the K version, you can actually see it. I'm not sure if it's going through, if you guys can make out, but if we look at the loom here, you can actually see where the loom starts and finishes and where the printing on the dial is. Definitely see it here. I must admit, the loom printing and application is done better on the K version. Quite surprising, but we really are nitpicking here. They're both done very, very well, but in my opinion, they applied a little bit more evenly on the K, but really hardly noticeable at all. Alright, let's switch over to a quick loom shot. Okay, here we are having a look at the loom. Now, of course, the one on the right is the Japanese version, and the one on the left is the Malaysian made version. And as you can see, the brightness is pretty much the same. I think there's a slight tone difference. I think the Japanese version is a darker green. I may be wrong, it may be my viewfinder, but there is no discerning big difference. They're definitely both bright. In fact, the more I look at them, the more I think they look the same color. It might be my eyes deceiving me. What do you guys think? Do you think it's the same color? I really can't tell. Anyway, regardless of the shade of green, they definitely are both bright, clear and crisp, and you know, this is what Seiko's so famous for. How long they last, I found that they both pretty much behave exactly the same way. Anyway guys, so that's the old loom shot. Let's take it back to the studio. Okay, and welcome back guys. So let's just go through this in summary and just discuss which one is superior. Now, they both have their plus and minuses. The K version, in my opinion, has a better crown action to it. The loom is applied a little bit more accurately, so it wins in those departments. The Japanese version, however, is a tiny bit more accurate. The bezel action is a little more stiffer, and the brushing is far superior in my opinion. So those are the advantages. So really, they kind of come out equal. There is not one discernible difference that just puts one ahead of the other. It really is down to preference, and in my opinion, after looking at them as best as I can and having them for a few days each, I can't really say that I prefer one over the other. They both have their kind of little advantages and disadvantages. If this was a duel, they would tie, because as I said, you know, this might have the slightly better polishing and finishing to it, but then this has a better action to the crown and a slightly better applied loom. So it really is, you know, and again, I don't know if this is for all SKXs, but this is certainly evident here in the two examples I have before you. So a really interesting development. I'd really like to hear what you guys think down in the comments. Which do you think you would prefer? Which do you think is superior? If I'm going to mod out one for the channel or for the viewers, which would you prefer to see modded and used as a kind of as a foundation for my special edition? I'd really like to hear your guys' opinion down below. Okay guys, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please remember to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful, and I'll definitely catch you in the next one. Okay guys, ciao.